Hello humans. Today we're going to talk about the woo. It's Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th is a lucky day for me. My most recent death and rebirth day was a Friday the 13th, 4 years ago in July. We're going to talk about the woo, because people need to have a framework for understanding what's going on. And we're in the woo, we're in the over woo, and we need to discuss learning to swim in the woo, learning to do breaststrokes to be able to push down on the woo in order to be able to see over the waves of it and then go on. Because it's very deep, and you could get all kinds of conflicting messages trying to fathom the depth of thought of the politicians and the other influencers and the people out and about on media about what's going on, because you and they, in my opinion, don't have the appropriate framework. And that framework is the woo, right? It's all this stuff that's been hidden forever. The woo that can be named is not the woo, but it describes the woo. And we're in a period of time where the paradigm, the mental framework that we use to guide ourselves through life is yet again changing at a huge fundamental level. So this is akin to a change as when the first clocks appeared. So people think, oh, well, big deal, right? The first clocks that appeared were church clocks, and they served the same function in Christian Europe that the mullahs and the do in Muslim world, the callers, right? I can't think of what they're called in Judaism, but these are the people that would coordinate everybody in a village, pre-clock, pre-watch, pre-digital time, all of this. Everybody, how the hell do you know that church services are at 9 in the morning on a Sunday? How do you even know it's a Sunday, right? Somebody had to be in charge of that. And somebody had to be in charge of getting everybody there at the same time, more or less. And it was a royal pain in the butt going out and yelling, and these were the town criers. They'd tell everybody, wake up, you got 3 hours, church services today, it's Sunday, that kind of thing, because you may not even know. Anyway, and then then they went to bells and all of these other things, and then eventually it got to the point where there were clocks. And the clocks changed humans because it altered every human that could see the clock by changing time in our minds, because now we had concrete divisions for time as the hands of the clock rotated, and we could see the segments in which they rotate. So we had a framework for time. Time was on a dial, but it was always enclosed within a square reference, the circle within the square. And we get all this stuff from the Masons and that kind of crud, right? I'm not going to go into that symbology. But that reference of time to a discrete, segmented approach changed all of the humans. Ultimately, it got to the point where we had the time discretely segmented on our wrist, and then ultimately we go to digital time, in which we can decide how we want to see and reference and think about time on our wrist digitally, or see an analog reference, or any number of different displays. We're no longer bound by the rigid segments of the squared circle with the defined segments for time. But that was a change in how humans thought about their world. It was a paradigm shift. And there was a pre and post paradigm shift, but it was a slow one. It took hundreds of years. The first clocks that appeared in Italy and then in England, took hundreds of years to have this kind of an impact. Nowadays, you get a change in a digital display. It can have a massive impact on the social order because it can spread so fast because of the modern communications. But we have a we're in the midst of another one of these paradigm changes. And this paradigm change, and so in the issue of the clocks, the church steeples and the clocks and so on, that was a period of time where we were forming out of the woo an organization that we all took and internalized. And the people ahead of that formation could not have given credence to it occurring. If you had gone to a serf in southern England and said to them, well, you know, within the next 50 years, your children's children will be able to synchronize and get to the same place within this small segment of time of each other, he would have said, no, you're crazy, it can't happen, because everybody was used to more or less getting there and hanging around and waiting and that kind of thing. Plus, everybody had a different concept of l'heure, you know, the hour. An hour at first was not a segment of time of 60 minutes. It was an approximation of a point in time referencing to the sun's casting of a shadow. And so all this stuff evolves over time. So it takes a long time for these paradigm shifts to happen. We eventually get to the point where we're having modern communications, and then we find ourselves in this crazy ass world because of our latent latent condensed form issues, right? Because we're a condensate, we're energetic, we're life, which is matter that has energy in it and moving around, you know, self-determining, et cetera, et cetera. But we have because of that, because of the meat sacks, we have and not being 100% energetic, we don't rapidly evolve into changes. It takes a while. It's got to permeate our meat sack and be inculcated in part of us. And we're going through one of those, and these are always torturous. Okay, so it's like getting braces on your teeth where they try and shift the teeth ever so slightly, but it's like, well, fuck, it hurts because you're shifting it for years, you know, and it's incremental and so on and so on. So it's a torturous process. And we're in one of those torturous processes, but for us, that torture is going to be compressed because we have modern communications, everything's grossly speeded up. And here's where we find ourselves. We find ourselves in the woo, the overwoo of the moment. And this overwoo is, for many people, every bit as torturous as trying to realign teeth with braces, okay? Where they have the little wires and even rubber bands to put tension on them and stuff, right? Because you're actually trying to shift the tooth as it grabs to the bone, and it's got these, you know, big grabbers, and you're trying to get it to shift along the bone. And of course, it's going to be irritating and hurt. That's what's going on right now, all right? Only it's going to the whole social order. And it's not just the United States, it's all global. A lot of this torturous feeling is reflected in the Schumann resonances spiking and all these strange energies from space because it is actually caused or amplified by them, if not triggered and caused by these energies. And so we're feeling it in our bodies. Now, we find ourselves in a situation where our social order is being evolved around us by the nature of these energies, forcing us to be behaviorally unstable. So what's going to happen, or what is happening, is that individuals are swimming around in the woo. They're flailing around in the woo. They know that they don't have a solid footing anymore, that their world has been upended, and they don't yet have anything that they can put their feet on to stand and say, okay, it's right here. I've got at least this point of solidity from which to move forward. And this is part of the woo, this unstable position that we're all in, that we're always rocking. Okay, so this is the nature of the woo. But I'm here to say today, be advised that even though the nature of the woo is like a balance board and you've got to constantly shift, you're on a boat, the waves are moving you, you've got to constantly shift to respond to those in order for you to remain stable relative to the environment you're looking at. That is being amplified, all right? The Western world is having this instability amplified by our enemies. And so now I'm going to get into the aspects of the woo that could be apparent if you wanted to go and look for them, right? So you could go and look, and you could see that there were books published in the Chinese state in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s even, that culminated in the books on unrestricted warfare. In there, that is a plan to bring the United States and all the Western world under domination by the CCP. And if you went all the way back into the 60s, you would find, and actually even into the 40s and the 50s, okay, because it was not hidden then. Now, I know the history going back and have seen the aspects of this, and I can pin it back into early connections between China and the Brits, and China and the United States on the West Coast, right? And even back into the 1800s, you find examples, although they are not as prevalent as what we see from, say, 1900 onward, picking up into the 1920s and then into the 30s, 40s, 50s in an onrush. And then they eliminated it. They dampened it down. But we get this idea of this unrestricted warfare and pre-communism, pre-Mao, pre-Chiang Kai-shek, pre-World War II, there was an element of it that comes from the Chinese emperors, and that has been inculcated into a racial group within the Chinese people called the Han. Now, not all Han are this way, but those Han that are in power, the Han group is in power. This racial group is in power in China. And the Han group, like all racial groups, has got their share of nastiness in their history, right? But this Han group has a very racist attitude against all other, they're very xenophobic, even among humans. So Han Chinese, in my personal experience, I've known Han Chinese, went to school with some. And they were thought of as standoffish, right? And the Han Chinese I knew were, reflected that. They weren't, they're not go out and get a drink and, get slobbery drunk and fight with you and that kind of thing, right? They're just reserved, And the Han Chinese think of themselves in general as superior to other humans. And they have this lineage that ties them back into all this weird stuff with dragons and so on, right? All this lizard reptilian kind of stuff. And there are many people that will tie that to the British royals thinking that they're descendant from sea monsters, reptiles. And many people will tie that all the way back to this idea of the Cain and Abel business, that Cain was the reptilian line within humans, and Abel was the 100% human line. And many people in the woo world will take that even further back to the point of the Elohim coming down onto this planet, and the 15 Elohim creation centers being set up around the globe, in which the 15 subspecies of man were produced. And this is why humans, due to dogs, cats, horses, and everything else, expand the clade horizontally, as was done to us. Very unique if you go and look at that in evolution. So race matters, okay? In the Han Chinese understanding of things, the Elohim that created them, they're coming to existence here on Earth they have this lineage, and so in essence, they think of themselves as the chosen ones, right? The created ones, and so they think of their destiny as being the dominant, not analog, remnant of the Elohim social order here on Earth. They're going to take over everything, and that's their goal. And it is from there that we get such characters as Ming the Merciless in Flash Gordon, right? Getting a lot of shit for being racist and so on. Well, in the 30s and 40s, the Han did not disguise their racism at all in their dealing with the rest of the world. Nowadays, they've toned it down. Nowadays, they are using racism. They've weaponized racism, as we see with the woke culture. And they weaponize racism in their own Chinese social order, because there's 140 plus subgroups of Chinese. And no, all Chinese don't look alike, right? And so this is why the Han are, well, this is how they are able to do things to other racial groups within China and not get shit. They've got 140 racial groups that they've all got conquered by dividing them and pitting them at each other, and the Han sit up and rule it all. They're clever fuckers. And they've been clever fuckers for a long time, because the Han were the emperor class and they really mastered all of this, right? And so the Han came up with this idea, and this idea was that they would use, and this goes back into the 1800s, and we get back into the Opium Wars and all of that. It originates from that contact between the Han and the British. And in that point, all people not Chinese, not Asian, were considered at that point to be basically cattle, the same way that the Jews have all non-Jews goyim, cattle, you know, to be herded around, that sort of thing, right? And so this is a racial abuse policy that is inherent in xenophobia, and you find it in all races. And you can bitch and moan, but, you know, black people sold other black people into slavery, you know, and Arabs did the same thing. It's an inherent aspect of xenophobia. And it is what supports at its ultimate core such things as sociopathy and psychopathy, right? If you're a psychopath, you are an ultimate racist of one. So anyway, we're at that point here where we're swimming in the woo. The woo is out there. You people can feel it. You don't live it the way that the paranoids and the fringe people have done all of their lives. You know, the Max Egans, the David Ikes, even myself. I'm elevating myself to put them in that same category as those two luminaries. But we are all swimming in the woo. Now, we recognize, we individuals that are woo floaters, right? We float in the woo our whole lives. We recognize this, and we can see the woo around us, and we understand the woo flows through us, and we are part of it, subsumed in it, and so on. And we don't attempt to differentiate ourselves, but we are able to differentiate things within the woo. And to a certain extent, we live a little bit more comfortable lives than a lot of the normies, because we don't have these woo collisions, or rather we had our woo collisions so far back in our youth that it altered us forever. And many people are going to encounter this woo as we see now in their later years. And so we see such things as people making inappropriate conclusions from what they're seeing out and about, not recognizing that their reality is being distorted by the woo. And further, that there are people within the woo who are deliberately woo masters to some degree that are distorting, using the woo itself to distort their enemies' impressions of what's going on. So we're being attacked by the Chinese. We've been attacked in our election systems. We've been attacked with the virus. We're being continually attacked with their weaponizing racism. We're being continually attacked with their weaponizing our mainstream media. We're being continually attacked with their weaponizing the commercials and the movies and the music and so on. So we are being continually attacked. The West is being continually attacked by the Han Chinese, by Ming the Merciless. And we don't have any Flash Gordons out there, right? And it's not this one-on-one battle. This is a battle en masse for minds. And so many people, because the Ming the Merciless's crew have been very good. Bear in mind that this is another element of Ming the Merciless, right? You don't know you don't know the names of any of his people working for him. The communism is a power structure with the leader and everybody else. So we only know Ming the Merciless. And you know, the Chinese bitch that it was racist for us to say that, but at the time when Ming the Merciless character was created, the Chinese were the most racist people on the planet. They were very open about it. And they were the enemy, et cetera, et cetera. So it was quite natural to characterize that. And there were also people that understood at that time that the battle that was more out in the open within the Wu of that time, before the Chinese were able to clamp down on the mainstream media globally in their joining with the Western global elites, who they corrupted. They were already corrupt. Okay, so the Western global elites were already corrupt. But the Ming the Merciless, the Han Chinese, did to the Western global elites what the Persians did to Alexander the Great. So Alexander the Great was a fellow by all reputes, was had father issues. He was homosexual and he had father issues. And he set out and he was named Alexander the Great for killing lots of people. He didn't create anything. He didn't leave a lasting empire. When he died, it disappeared. He was only great for organizing a bunch of Greek people to sail around the world and kill a lot of people and notionally take over their countries in an empire. But Alexander the Great didn't administer anything. He didn't come up with any bureaucracy. He didn't have any innovation in administration or anything. He didn't add anything to universe, unlike Temujin, Genghis Khan. Okay, Genghis Khan was in many ways much greater at killing people. The Mongols were much greater at killing people than Alexander the Great. The Mongols killed reputedly something like 1/4 of all Muslims, or 1/10 of the people on the planet in their scourge, from going from the Mongol lands in the North Gobi deserts all the way down through into Saudi Arabia, etc., through India. And so Alexander the Great was not as good a killer as Genghis Khan, but Genghis Khan left behind administrative law, book of law for the Mongols, all different kinds of stuff. He built an empire out of a ravaging tribe. Okay, all Alexander the Great did was to guide that ravaging tribe all around through the planet, from Macedonia through India over into Persia, what we now call Iran. And in Persia, they saw him coming, right? And the Persians had a huge empire and a huge army and so on, but they were at a point where they were very weak relative to political power to get everybody to get on out there. They were happy, they were flush, they were rich, and ripe for the plunder, so to speak, because the populace was not hardened and so on. And so Alexander, comes on in and starts taking over big chunks of India as he's going through killing a lot of people. And the Persians see him heading their way, and so they develop a plan, and so they suckered him in, right? They did not offer a lot of resistance. There was a token little bit of battle, and then they basically let him come on in and conquer, and they gave him wine, they gave him basically a lot of drugs and a lot of sex, and then they poisoned him, and he died. So it was like, okay, not a big deal, right? And so that kind of a paradigm-forming situation is where we are at right now. Our Ming the Merciless enemy which we can characterize the CCP as that, they're quite merciless and they're Han Chinese, is using all kinds of weapons against us. And our guys have yet to grasp the level to which this war has descended. So they've attacked us biologically, they've attacked us economically, socially, et cetera, and we're still flailing around, and we don't recognize, much of the United States doesn't recognize it's under multiple forms of attack, full spectrum attack. Much of the United States doesn't recognize that there are many ways out, and we're floundering on getting out of some of this because the people don't understand the woo, right? And the leaders. And so we see such things as DeSantis and his moves against COVID. COVID is an attack. Beyond COVID being an attack, all of the histrionics and all of the supposed public health moves being made by Biden, who is a captured Beijing Biden, all of the public health moves being made by him are in fact weapons of war being used against us to further the problems. So they're using so China benefits by putting out the COVID. And remember, we don't have an isolated virus. There is no virus. What we have is a sequence given to us by the CCP. And we should trust them. And so we use this sequence, which was created and put in the Moderna vaccines and so forth, to inject everybody, and it supposedly is a vaccine, right? But it's got the sequence itself in it, which is the bioweapon. And the CCP tells our elites, like Bill Gates and stuff, that the whole part of the plan is for these people to have the perpetual dollar supply from the perpetual vax, right? And so that's their goal. That's their titular or nominal goal for the elites, is to make money off of this. And they don't care if a bunch of people die or not, but they don't see it as that. They don't really see it as that. Some of the elites know that the idea of the vax is also to cause sterilization, right? As part of their Depop agenda. And so they're fine with it. They're cool with it. But what they didn't grasp was that the CCP was using the elites and their Depop agenda not only to sterilize, but also to directly kill and weaken, specifically males. And specifically the youngest possible males that they can get. And so they use the media to drive the message that males, young males, must get vaxxed. And so it perpetuates. So they've got it set up so that this message is in existence because they know they're going to be doing that. They know they're going to be doing the sterilization. They know it's part of this Depop here, and the elites are going to do it. And the CCP is just going to prompt them to do all of this in order that the CCP the Han Chinese can come around and dominate all of the planet. So in that sense, the CCP had gone to our elites and pulled a Persian rug on them the way the Persians did to Alexander, right? They seduced the elites. They seduced the Bidens and the Cheneys and the Bushes and all of these people. All they had to do, all the Chinese had to do, the CCP had to do, was find out what their trigger was, what their weasel was. And then they would go and find something that would fit their weasel. And so it didn't matter, if they're pedophiles, they find them children, because there's over 1 billion Chinese. They don't mind, life is cheap. So they grab what they need and they use it. And so they don't mind giving out Chinese people to our elites. And they basically made a deal with our elites that they're going to sink the West and turn it into a shithole and take it over. And in the meantime, the elites can come to China and live like kings. because there's a lot of Chinese to abuse, right? That sort of thing. And then they double-crossed them. And so our elites are now starting to realize that the CCP have left them out hanging in the wind. And so a lot of the elites are starting to get a little bit weirded out because they had sunk the West and had really exposed themselves in doing so. And I don't know for sure, but I think maybe it was the CCP that was prompting the elites through some mechanism that caused them to move these plans 30 years forward. They had planned all this shit most recently to pop off in 2020 and 2025, but their original plan had all of this stuff happening 2050 and beyond. And then they moved it forward 30 years. I was uncertain and still am uncertain as to why. What is prompting it? It's clearly not climate change or any of that kind of shit, right? But there is something that made them move 30 years early, which exposed their whole game plan and stuff, and that's why it's all breaking down. And that's why our leadership is floundering, because in the breakdown of the paradigm, all of the leaders are clinging to bits of the framework of the paradigm, hoping that the paradigm will recreate itself, and it will not, because we are in a great shift of ages, moving out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, in which knowledge becomes individuated down to the core level and is not held at an organizational level anymore. This is one of the telltale signs of the age of Aquarius. Just as in the move from the age of Aries, the ram, in which the religions and the knowledge was centralized and gathered, it went into Pisces, in which people were schooled. That is to say, the knowledge was distributed by the elites down to a certain level in order to get the school to go to be able to school and for humanity to progress. And now we're into the age of Aquarius, and that knowledge comes down to the individual level, and we have the internet and all of basically all of these Aquarian devices and so on that are individuating knowledge down to that level. Now, it doesn't mean that you either have that knowledge gives you intelligence or wisdom. So bear that in mind. We're just talking knowledge, right? And so we're still going to have a lot of stupid people without wisdom. But we're at this point now where this is the framework of the Wu. This is what we're living in here in the Western world. Now, the Chinese have their own problems. The Chinese people are basically suffering from their elites the same way we are. The Chinese people have been also depopulated. And so our elites were freaking out when this thing happened. They knew it was coming and so on, but they didn't realize it was going to be so fierce because so many millions of Chinese have died. Unreported. CCP is not reporting anything. And who knows how many millions of United States people and Western European people and so on have died from the injection of the mixture that includes sterilizing agents as well as killing agents in the form of the spike protein. Now, maybe millions. We just don't know. No one's keeping track of this stuff. There are people that are dying on their own, having very bad reactions to the vaccine. Old people dying in their apartment that are discovered days later, and never attributed to anything, just packed off and normal course of business around death, and off it goes. So our social order and all of the world, all of the humanity is in the midst of this. And it's because these fuckers here have caused it all. Now, this is the nature of the Wu, okay? And that is that things can be hidden in reality. The universe will tolerate these guys hiding shit for a long time, but not perpetually. The universe will tolerate them doing abusive things for a long time, because in those times, individuals such as us, in our incarnations, suffer and grow from that suffering, such that our next incarnation, we grow more, because each and every time you come into an incarnation and get a certain level of knowledge, it allows you to gain more knowledge the next time you incarnate. The mechanism of reality, of materium, of life, deaths, and suffering, unabstracted, felt, experienced will seem cruel and harsh unexamined. If you think about it, acceptance brings acceptance that it must be this way. And just as the United States suffering now under the Beijing Biden, being put in place by the CCP through their hacking of the election, at the same time that they use the COVID and all of this stuff as a tool to cause that election to be able to be hacked easier, that is a necessary experience. It is part of our necessary lived experience that we must take these blows to the body politic and our mental framework in order that we might see. And universe provides us with this opportunity in order that we might grow. And it is up to us with our free will to decide that we shall do both, that we shall see what is there to be seen, and that we shall grow from that seeing. This is the nature of life. You're here to learn what to do and what not to do. And so part of the conclusions to take from the woo is that you want to immerse yourself in it. You want to understand that in order that there be solidity, you have to create it. You have to create the framework. You have to create the location within your point of view of reality for all of these pieces to fit in. And they do fit. And where they do not fit, it is because you are not allowing them to fit. So in reality, they do fit. Okay? But if you have something that isn't working out, oh, well, shit. Breakthrough cases, vaccines, that kind of thing, right? It's not breakthrough cases. The vaccine is causing these people to be ill. Once you say that to yourself, then all this other shit falls into place around that. And you're no longer swimming in that woo. You have a point of solidity to walk on. But it takes you saying that to yourself and acknowledging that. Because here's what happens. You say, it's not a breakthrough case. These people are sick because they got that shot. And then you say, fuck. Did the people that gave them that shot know this would happen? Did the people that made that shot know this would happen? And so on and so on and so on. See, every time you get a point of stability within the woo, it's going to generate these other questions. Now, at any and every given point of this process of solidifying your woo, of gelling it, you have the option of stopping the process of the questioning. You need not proceed with those questions because they are infinite. And so know that. Know that all of those questions are infinite. There's been so much hidden from you that you have no idea as to how far you're going to be able to ask questions. So don't bother. So get to the point of the problem at the moment. The point of the problem might be masks on children, and yes, masks are indeed part of the CCP causing the elite to cause the mainstream media to cause this message going out, to cause all of this stuff to happen in order that our males in our society might be weakened. Why do you think it's only males that are invading from Europe, from Africa, and the Arab worlds? Why is it only males coming across the border en masse, other than children? Down in the southern border here in the United States. It is an invasion. It is part of the infiltration. This is the invasion part of it. All of this is going to bust out here really quick, right? So get your gelling of the woo to start. You need to start gelling a solidity point around you within the woo from which to start making appropriate decisions. And what is keeping the woo, keeping you from doing that, keeping you from creating a new paradigm is your mind only. And it is understandable. These are hard things to accept, right? And And it's very difficult, and it's very difficult within our minds. But once you do that, once you accept one of these points, any of them, you can gel some of that place around you enough to stand on, and then you can make appropriate decisions and start creating the new paradigm you need to see. And of course, there is the big key for you, that if it doesn't seem to gel, is it the facts or is it you? Is there something you're not willing to accept that you're pushing away that is keeping the gelling process from starting, from completing for you? And that's really where we're at now, with all of the giant amounts of woo overflowing all of the paradigms, and the fact that these people right here have within their armies people who know how to manipulate the woo to create amplification for their own purposes. So this is why I fight so diligently against the mainstream media, because I know that my enemy is just on the other side of them. And that's their weak point. Once this is cracked, once that is taken out of there, all kinds of stuff start falling away, and things will gel for all kinds of people who didn't even know. They don't even know they're standing in the woo and that it's flowing over them. They just know that shit don't make sense, and they have no clue as to what's going on. And so, but once we get rid of these guys and they're on their way out, then the woo is going to start solidifying, and some of this stuff will have a common platform for all of us to stand on while we address the fact that we're under attack continuously, daily, etc., etc. Anyway, so this was just a sort of a call to action to start gelling your woo. So when people are out there telling you breakthrough cases, if anybody ever says that to you, say, no, I don't accept that word. These people are sick because they took the vaccine, not because of a breakthrough case. Language matters. You can't gel the woo without being accurate in your language. The very first act of all beings that have had the Enlightenment experience is to accurately call things by their real names. That was a shock to me.